Welcome to Deep Thought. People in different social groups think differently. I want y'all to think about that, right? I want y'all to think about that. Yeah, I had to scratch my head. I'm not going to edit it out. Anyway, people in different groups actually think differently. Like, I'll give you an example, because, well, first of all, y'all know I have a big interest in subcultures and different groups and everything. Y'all know and one of the things I know just from self-study, from education, I haven't even gone to school or anything for it, but just paying attention on my own. People actually think differently. Like, like two different social groups, some poor folks and some rich folks, right? They're actually different thinking, because I've been around both. I've been around both. I told you as I grew up, I would say it was the gift of being around very poor people, because I used to live in Southeast DC. It was a rough area at the time. And it's going through some gentrification now, but at the time it was a very rough area. And it was also near a mental health institution in the DC area, St. Elizabeth. So I was seeing some interesting people just in the area. But then if I would go to visit my grandmother or my grandfather, they lived in a better area, you know? And so they had a different mindset. And then that's where I started noticing. And then when I went to private high school, my grandmother put me in a private high school, Archbishop Carroll in DC, I started noticing different thoughts and everything. That's where I started noticing. So when people are in different groups, they think differently. One of the differences between rich folks and poor folks is not money, believe it or not. It's not money. People would think it's money, but then you have some people who, like some working class folks who are making six figures. Meanwhile, you have some people who come from upper middle class environments. You know, they might be making half of that. So you have someone who might be a plumber or somebody who works on HVACs or something, making six figures. Meanwhile, you have this person who came from a rich upper class environment making very little. But when you talk to them, it's not the money that makes the difference, it's their thoughts. It's their thoughts, because the person from the upper class environment, they might feel like, oh no, I want to help people. I want to work for this nonprofit. I want to help all these people. So they're not going to make that much money. Meanwhile, the person from the working class, they're going to make money. You know, they doing some plumbing or, working on air conditioning, some type of blue collar work, and they're making a lot of money. But then when you look at how they think according to whatever class they come from, regardless of how much money they make. Regardless. I want y'all to think about that. You know, one of the things I've noticed in studying different subcultures, different communities, different groups, they have different ways of thinking and looking at things. You know, I've been around some people who are part of what's called the autistic community. Now, people would think, oh, well, what they think about? No, trust me, they think differently. In fact, I had a very good friend. She was a teacher in that community, and she was saying, oh no, they thinking totally different, got their own dances, everything. That's because they thinking differently. You know, I first, when I thought about the deaf community, they don't see, that deaf community doesn't see being deaf as a dysfunction or as a problem, just a different way of being. So they thinking differently, they're communicating differently. American Sign Language is their language. So they looking at things differently, And that's one of the things, is like, I can tell like a lot of where people come from, like their social class, maybe even their religion, stuff like that, but how they think, how they look at stuff. Like if you look at black Muslims, specifically black Muslims, they think a whole lot differently from maybe Muslims from the Middle East. There's a difference in thought. And then there's a difference in how they, as black people, think differently from maybe blacks who are part of a Christian community. If you're around them, it's like how they talk, how they move, everything. In fact, even talking about Muslims, let me use the Muslim example again. I remember I knew this guy, and he was Irish. He was Irish, but he started hanging around like Middle Easterners, like really hanging around them. And then I noticed something. All of a sudden, he colored his hair black. He was a natural redhead. He colored his hair black, and then his speech intonation changed. His whole thought pattern changed, and I really paid attention to that. I was like, oh, okay. How he spoke, how he carried himself, how he moved and everything. He was thinking differently. You know, when you look at different social groups, one of the things I look at is not so much their money. Like I said, somebody rich might not be making that much money, but they from a rich environment. And if they get in trouble, they can go back to mommy and daddy's mansion or something. Meanwhile, if someone who's blue collar, but they making six figures and there's some problems or something, they might be in real trouble. They might be in real trouble. But it's still how they think. And that's one of the things whenever I talk with someone and they're in a group, I start paying attention to everything from how they dress, how they look at stuff, everything. When you look at different groups, you know, if you look at them politically, there's a difference in how someone progressive thinks versus how someone conservative thinks, how they look at someone, you know? And I've actually seen some psychologists who've talked about that. And that's all it is. It's just thinking. Because being in a group is more than just wearing the uniform of that group. That's only a part of it. But it's how they think, how they look at stuff. And it's something to consider. Like I said, I've always studied these different groups, and it was like, oh, they think differently. You know, when you look at different religions, different groups, they're not looking at stuff the same way. And you can even extend that to racial groups. Different racial groups will think differently. And people who adopt the thinking patterns of certain racial groups, like someone black might adopt quote unquote white thinking, quote unquote, because there's multiple groups in there. But what's stereotypically considered white thinking, they're going to think differently from someone who follows quote unquote black thinking. And I'm going to emphasize the quotes because there's multiple groups within each racial group. But then they might be following a stereotype, thinking a certain way. I want y'all to think about that and pay attention. Pay attention. You know, you know, there's a difference in how different social classes are think, different social groups are think. Any group, there's always a difference in thinking, how they're going to look at something, how they're going to react to something. Indeed, many of the days know that, particularly economic days know that. Because one of the main things they do, and that's how they know, like the economic days, that's how they know to put maybe a big grocery store in this area selling certain foods, but maybe not in this other area. Or to put a store in in one area where we're having certain clothes, but not in this other area, because they're looking at all of that. Trust me, they pay good money for that because they realize that. It's something to think about. You know, I throw out stuff here. Think about it on your own. Think about the different groups, different types of people you met, and how they were thinking about different things. All right. So anyway. As always, think on this, and I will get back with y'all later. Peace and blessings.